As a pastor, it's a good idea to be well read on leadership books and what leaders are saying in a variety of fields, such as business and politics and in churches, etc. And just to be the best leader you can be. And one of the things that I've noticed is good leaders have two things in common. One of those is a compelling vision that captures the imagination and passions of his or her people. I think we, whether or not we agree with what happened last, Tuesday and Wednesday, I thought you saw what played out as a compelling vision. One side was make America great, and the other side was we don't like him. Whether you like it or not, that is exactly how, from an academic outside perspective, because I didn't like anybody, that you looked at it from an intellect, one side captured the imagination of his people, and one side did not. So a compelling vision. The second one is a plan to accomplish the compelling vision. And I think Hillary Clinton had a much better plan to accomplish her less than compelling vision than Donald Trump had a plan to get to his compelling vision. Am I right? Build a wall. How? I just will. Got it. All right, we got this down. You had a compelling vision versus a detailed plan. You saw it play out in our elections. A good leader can do both of those. Compelling vision, and this is how we're going to get there. A compelling vision, this is how we're going to get there. If there's no plan, people begin to get frustrated at the talk and the lack of promises and we didn't get what we wanted, and how do we even get there? And they stop believing in you and they move on to another person with a compelling vision and a detailed plan. If there's no vision, people get frustrated and confused at where they are going. If there's neither, the person is not a leader, but he's actually a follower trying to act like a leader. He's just a fraud. And if there's both, the leader and the people succeed. Daniel chapter 9 contains God's vision and plan for the nation of Israel. As a result of Daniel's passionate plea, God laid out his vision and his plan for the nation of Israel. So if you're there, Daniel chapter 9 verse 1. It says, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, by descent a Mede, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, must pass before the end of desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So it starts off where Daniel, in this year of Darius, he was a Mede/Persian leader. He was made a king over the land of the Chaldeans. Daniel started remembering and started to study, wait a second, I remember coming across this in another book. And he begins to study the book of Jeremiah, specifically Jeremiah chapter 25. Verses 8 through 12 says this, just as Jeremiah 25, 8 through 12, says, therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, because you have not obeyed my voice. Verse 9, behold, I will send for all the tribes of the north, declare the Lord, and for Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants, and against all these surrounding nations. I will devote them to destruction and make them a horror, a hissing and an everlasting desolation. Moreover, I will banish from them the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness and the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the grinding of the millstones and the light of the lamp. The whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then after 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, declares the Lord, making the land an everlasting waste. Daniel has been in Babylon for 70 years. He is an older man, most likely firmly in his 80s at this point. And he has seen, and as we've studied, Daniel's chapter 1 through 6, we have seen some incredible accounts in Daniel's life and ministry in the land of Babylon. And as he was getting older, he started looking around. He watched the rise and the fall of the Chaldean Empire, all according to what God has said. And now he looks back, and now Babylon has fallen. The Chaldean Empire has fallen. They have been judged on how they treated and how they responded to the nation of Israel. God has judged them for their wickedness, and now a new empire has gone and set up over the Chaldeans. And it has been 70 years, just like God promised to Jeremiah. So here's the thing. The 70 years now passed. Now what? What's going to happen now? And Daniel says in verse 3 that I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. And he prayed and asked the Lord what was going to happen next. And he prayed and he prayed and he prayed. And from verses 3 through verse 20, he poured out his heart and begged God to show him what would happen. Would they be restored? When would they get their freedom back? When would God forgive them in his mercy? When was this going to happen? And we're not going to study the prayer. That is actually for the community groups, verses 3 through 20. That is what you guys are going to study in your community groups here this week. We're going to move on to verse 21. Verse 21. So 3 through 20 describe the prayer. And like I've said other weeks, it is a good idea. Always try to read one chapter ahead, because some of these chapters get pretty long, and we're going to, be moving through them a little bit quicker. But so read, next week, read Daniel chapter 10. But here in Daniel chapter 9, verse 21, or we'll start at verse 20. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my plea before the Lord my God for the holy hill of my God, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at first, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. He made me understand, speaking with me and saying, O Daniel, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding. God decided to answer Daniel's prayer. Now, before I continue, I want to emphasize one important thing. This isn't some mysterious, weird, trippy dream vision thing that looked like the result of too much pizza the night before. This was not this conflict of beasts and horns growing on heads and shrinking and growing and animals stomping on each other and other animals showing up. And it wasn't anything like that. See, those were supposed to overwhelm Daniel, supposed to overwhelm the reader, like, what is going on here? We can understand key aspects of it. We can understand roughly how it plays out, but overall, a lot of it is still left in mystery to us. This wasn't one of those examples. Daniel was expected to understand the vision. He says, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding. And as he says at the end of verse 23, therefore, consider the word and understand the vision. Daniel was expected to understand it, and so are we today. So if you guys look at your little sheet, that is the first blank. Okay. Understand the vision. We are supposed to understand this vision as well. And so verse 24, God casts his vision. He casts his vision. The vision is cast in verse 24. Let's see what it says. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. 70 weeks are declared to do this, and this. During election time, what is considered the president's most important, powerful time in office? It's the first how many days? 100 days. That is when the president is supposed to revolutionize a country that has been around for 200-something years. If not, he's a failure. 100 days. That's all he gets. And God is like, in 70 weeks, I will do this. 70 weeks, this is what is declared. 1, I'm going to finish Israel's sin. I want to say before we keep going, this is 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city. This vision, this plan is specifically for the nation of Israel. Okay? This is what God has said will happen. No conditions. This will happen to the nation of Israel in the 70 weeks' time. This plan is for the nation of Israel. There's no mention that this is going to happen to any other group of people. Gentiles, church age, nothing. This is for the people and the nation of God. 70 weeks are declared. 1, I'm going to finish Israel's sin. You guys are like, what does that even mean? Pretty much, the consequences of Israel's sin and rebellion would run its course. It was going to take 70 weeks. Rebellion is going to run its course. You finally have been punished enough. It's time to move on. Second, I'm going to put an end to sin. Israel would stop rebelling. Not only would the punishment be taken away, and it's finally done to move on, it's like, okay, sorry, child, you have been grounded for 2 weeks, okay? I had this tendency when I played video games, I would get slightly worked up. I lied there. I would get very worked up. My brother and I would play like Street Fighter and stuff like that, and I would get so mad at each other. We would throw the controller down on the ground when we'd get mad, And so what ended up happening is my dad started saying, okay, if you do that again, you're going to get grounded from a day. No Super Nintendo. All right, well, boom, grounded for a day. Man. Started playing the next day. Grounded 2 days. He started doubling it every time. 1 day, 2 days, 4 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month. I ended up grounded for 6 months. And after that time, I finally learned to stop sinning and throwing my controller. Took a while. It's the same thing that's playing out here. Not only would the consequence run its course, Israel would finally learn to stop rebelling. Like I learned to stop slamming my controller down into the ground. Yes. See, you guys just learned something about me. I don't do that now because that'd be my whole computer. That'd be really dramatic. All right, the next thing was to atone for sin, also called to pay. When one atones, one pays. So sin would be taken care of. Not only, and we know, because God is a holy God, He is a just God, and He is a righteous God, there has to be a reckoning. The reckoning, there has to be judgment for it. God just can't let it go. It's okay. Let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. There has to be punishment because He is righteous, because He is good, He is just. He has to take care of it. This is why people who do not place their faith and trust in Jesus Christ to rescue them from their sins, they will not receive eternal life because their sin has not been paid for. And God is a righteous judge. He's righteous. He's good. So it says He will, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to pay it, to bring in everlasting righteousness, which is the next one, and to seal both vision and prophet. And what that pretty much means, and the everlasting righteousness, that pretty much means for ever and ever, we have been sealed by God's righteousness, by which will never leave us. And we are very familiar with the benefits of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We have been pretty much stamped with the righteousness of Jesus Christ. There's in us, outside us. Now, when God looks at us, He sees Jesus Christ. to seal or complete prophecy and vision. And this is an easy way to describe this is pretty much the book of Revelation. God goes and he finishes the entire history of man, puts it in a nice package, puts a nice little bow on it, and it's tied and it's done. Everything will come to conclusion then. It'll take, 7 weeks, okay? There's a passage in Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 through 34, where it says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days. I will put my law within them. I will write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people." So God is promising in another way. So this is one way he's communicating this to Daniel. In Jeremiah, he's communicating another one. He says, I will write my law on your hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. That is talking about full restoration between the people of Israel and God. God has said, I'm going to bring them together. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, "Know the Lord, for they will all know me. From the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. And I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more." This is how God cast his vision. In the book of Jeremiah, he's like, one day a time is going to come when you will stop sinning, where the punishment and the penalty of sin will be wiped away. The relationship between you, Israel, and me, God, will be brought back together. We will have peace once again. Things will be eternally bliss. There is nothing better than this. One day this is going to happen for the nation of Israel. And as a result, what's going to happen is he's going to anoint a most holy place. So if you want to see this plays out, just read the temple and the city of God in the book of Revelation, and it will blow your mind. There will come a time, and it is all personified in the person of Jesus Christ. So God says, I am going to bring this all about in 70 weeks. This is my plan for Israel. Daniel, this is my plan for you and your people. This is God's vision. He was going to, in quote, make Israel great again, close quote. Corny, I know. You guys are like, I don't get it. Make America great, make Israel great. Okay. You guys probably burn out from politics, I know. That's what happens. Keep going. Everyone caught up so far? Okay, so I'm going to treat this sort of like a class because this next part is sort of the doozy. Okay, so you guys are the next side. So we're going to refer to the back side of the sheet with all the cool graphics and the little square on the sheet that we just talked about, okay? And so first, God casts the vision. This is what I'm going to do. This is my plan for you. It's going to be awesome. So now he's going to describe the timeline here in verses 25 through 27. He says, "Know therefore, and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem, to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. And then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moats, but in a troubled time. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off, and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wings of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator." It's going to take 70 weeks are declared. So what you guys have here now is you guys have your sheets with a couple lines that says 70 weeks equals 70 blanks equals blank years. And then 7 weeks equals blank, 62 weeks equal blank. There's a gap and there's a 1 week gap, etc. These lines are, so you know how a timeline goes, from the past to the future, and they're sort of highlights. That's what I tried to accomplish here. So on the very far left of your sheet, where it says 7 weeks, that is when everything starts. That is when the timeline, begins. And then these are the major events that happen through, and then it'll end on the right, pretty much until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. That is the end. So we're going to timeline this based on just Daniel verses 24 through 27. That is what we're going to do here. And I find when you actually see it on paper, everything starts making a little more sense. Okay. So first thing we're going to do, I think I forgot a slide. That's okay. Good. Okay. All right. So he says in verse 24, he says 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city. Now we think to ourselves, 70 weeks. How many weeks are in a year? Quiz question. 52. Right. So pretty much that's like what? A year and a third. All right. Wait a second. Is that really what's going on here? See, when we think weeks, we think days, don't we? The word isn't actually weeks. I mean, weeks work. The reason why weeks work is a week means it's a block of 7. It's a set of 7. So 70, so what Daniel is saying here, 70 sets of 7. 70 sets of 7. So that blank, 70 weeks equal 70 sets of 7. But sets of 7 what? Days, weeks, decades, millennia, hours, minutes, seconds, feelings? Oh, we don't really know, okay? So 70 sets of what? 70 sets of 7 equals how many years? Now, if you guys look, you guys flip your sheet or piece of paper over. Make sure you're getting, okay, so you guys see this little block, okay, on the back of you guys' paper. See the one here? So at the bottom, it says a half week is Daniel 9:27. 3 are times, and half a time. You guys remember when we talked about that in Daniel chapter 7? Where he said this will take place in times, and half a time. It's sort of, I told you there that it meant 3.5 years, and this is the reason why. And if you guys look at your guys' sheet, so there's a mention of a half week. Daniel 9:27. We don't really know what that is yet. Okay, based on this, we don't have days, minutes, hours. We just have sets of 7 and half a set of 7. And we don't really know what that means. But it's referred to in Daniel chapter 7, this phrase times, and half a time. Later in Revelation chapter 11 and chapter 12 and chapter 13, which I will encourage you guys to go read on your own time, very specific days and times are being used. A reference is made of this event in Revelation is going to take 1,260 days. It's said another way that this time is this exact same thing that's going on will take 42 months. And the reason why we bring it into Daniel chapter 7 and 9, etc., is because in the book of Revelation, in Daniel chapter 12, verse 14, it uses the phrase times, and half a time. So what's happening is, and you guys, I'm going to let you check this, but by Daniel referencing the exact same phrase of what is said in Daniel, he is grabbing the entire context of what's going on in Revelation and saying, this is what's going on in the book of Daniel. Does it make sense? It's one of those phrases that doesn't get used like ever. Times, and half a time? And so by being referenced in Daniel, and then all the way in the book of Revelation, which is another prophetic book, it says times, and half a time. So what ends up happening is, thus, and this is why you have, thus 42 months equals 1,260 days equals times, and half a time. It means equals half a week. So you guys track with me so far? I encourage you guys to check this out on your own. You see exactly what I'm saying. And lastly, that means 1 month, if you do all the division in the math, 1 month equals 30 days. A year, a biblical year, is 360 days. How many days is it for us? 365. Do you know why? Do you know what it's 365 and 1/4 because of leap year. Remember how we had to, because we're basing it on the sun. We're basing it on how often it takes the earth to go around, okay? Here, they actually reference the moon. That's why it's a lunar year. It's actually based on how often the moon comes around is 1 month. That's how the Israel calendar was set up. And every once in a while, they sort of have a leap month. It's sort of funny. But they have to, it would throw me off. But that's what they do, because they base theirs on the month. So, many moons from now is referenced a month. And so, on average, a month is 30 days. So a full year is 360 days. You guys tracking with me so far? That is right there is what you call a narrative brain dump. I just threw up information on you. But that is why I can stand up here, and what I'm going to say next is 70 weeks equals 490 years. Because of what I've just done. In the book of Revelation, they didn't have it back then. They didn't really have a time. They probably could figure it out and use like a historical perspective, whether they could watch it play out. This is how long it took to rebuild this. This is how long it took to here. They could figure that out. I mean, mankind, we're stupid, but we're not that dumb. We could figure that out. But what's nice is not only do we have a historical context by which to understand Daniel chapter 9, we also have a biblical context that gives Daniel 9 meaning. Because every once in a while, historically, we'll mess up on a date, or scrolls or files, or we won't properly understand something. The Bible gives it to us pretty clear. So what ends up happening is 70 weeks equals 490 years. And that means that what God is saying to Daniel is that it is going to take 490 Bible years, lunar years, to complete my plan for Israel. 490 years. This would be great. You guys are going to have so many questions. Awesome. That means 7 years, 7 weeks is 49 years. I'm doing the math for you, okay? 7 weeks is 49 years. 62 weeks is 434. So we have 49 years and 434. The gap, just put a big question mark there. And I'll explain that when we get to it. And then 1 week equals 7 years. So that's the math. That all added together, 490, etc. Okay, guys, with me so far? Make sure we're all cut up with the years and why I'm standing up here and I'm saying the 70 weeks is a period of 490 years. And if you want to go, I encourage you guys to check out that cool box that I copied from another book, so it's not mine. Mine would have been a little more complicated, but I encourage you to check that out and you guys will see how things connect. And so I encourage you guys to check that out. All right, so let's keep going. So here he has said, it is going to take 70 weeks for this to happen. And then he breaks it down in verse 25. He uses this verse or this phrase in verse 25, there shall be 7 weeks and 462 weeks. Some of you with an ESV translation, I love the ESV translation of the Bible. I preach from it all the time. I thought they botched this verse bad. In translating it from Hebrew and to English, I thought they created more confusion. It's one of the only times it's come across that. So I liked the NASB. I pulled out the NASB translation. And so this puts us all on the same page. Some of yours might say this. Mine got a little confusing. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So the ESV says then 62 weeks, and it starts blah, 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 blah. What ends up happening is you'll end up looking at it two separately, and you shouldn't. So he breaks it down into a 7-week period and a 62-week period. That's why we have it broken down on your timeline. There's a 7-week period, and there's a 62-week period. So he says, in this 7 and 62, in this time frame, what's going to happen is it will first, know and discern that a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 plus 62 weeks. So what you guys can do on your sheet is the very far left of your sheet underneath there is a command to rebuild Jerusalem. So underneath. That's how this timeline starts. is there will come a command to go and to rebuild Jerusalem. This is not a command to rebuild the temple, which happened as well. This is a command to rebuild Jerusalem. These, you can read up on these in Ezra and in Nehemiah. This captures this whole rebuilding the temple and rebuilding the city, etc. Those, it's sort of like one big giant, book. But that's where you can read a little bit more on that. But so that's where it starts. So I'm going to be referring to this, so a 62 plus 7. And then it says, it will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. This right here, what has a moat around it? Okay, what else? What's a castle have? Nope. It's something like a moat is built around, yes, a castle, but what is a castle known for? Walls. That's right, okay? You don't want to build a moat around a random building. You build a moat around a wall. It protects the wall from being sieged over. So there's this idea that there's going to be a wall built, a moat built around troubled times. Okay, you guys tracking with me so far? Okay, all right, let's keep going. All right, so we have 7 weeks, 62 weeks, total of 600, got it, okay? So now the question is, when did this start? When did this command begin? And this is where things get really confusing, and I get mad sometimes at the internet because I learn way more than I should, is that there are 4 documented commands to rebuild, or there are 2 to rebuild the temple and 2 to rebuild Jerusalem. How the commands played out is one emperor would go and say, hey, it's time to build the temple in Jerusalem. Yay! They go and build it. Well, then a new king comes up and everyone's like, can we still build the temple? And the new king is like, yes, you can go build the temple still. Yay! And they'd go. That's 2 different commands. Okay? And then they would do the same thing with the wall. You had one emperor would go say, hey, it's time to get Jerusalem up. We need a fortified. You guys can function and run. You guys will just sort of be a puppet state of the grand Persian Empire. And all the Jews are like, yay! And they go and they build it. But then the emperor died. Are we still allowed to build it? And the new emperor would be like, yes, I make a decree that you're still allowed to do this. Yay! And then they'd keep doing what they were doing. Make sense? That's why there's 4. The one where, this one balks around the wrong one, right here, in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1 and 8, there's like sort of a command, 526. In the 20th year of Artaxerxes, 444 BC, there was a commission to Nehemiah to finish building the city. Be done. Wrap it up. Finish it up. The command there. And I'm going to park there, and you'll see why I end up parking there. There is some disagreement. It's really not that big of a deal. Because really, out of these 4, it's one of them. You know what I'm saying? I lean more towards the 2 Jerusalem ones, but some people say, well, hey, wait. Jerusalem still wouldn't be fully in function if it didn't have a functioning temple because of how religious it is. I'm like, oh, okay, I can go with that. I don't agree. But overall, there are 4 documented commands to rebuild the city. This is where the timeline would begin. So I am going to rest on around 444 BC. That is roughly where I park. So on that line, 444 BC, it's ish. You guys know we're not going to die on that, but that's where we're going to start this timeline. And then so as cities go and as cities take a while, you can't build a city overnight. And so that next line that is in between the 7-week and the 62-week, that line right there, I would write underneath it, this is when it was built. The official Jerusalem as a functioning, recognized city in the Persian government, it would have taken them about 49 full years to get everything going. Now, some of you might think, wait a second, it only took them 52 weeks to build, or not 52 weeks. It only took them like 52 days to build a wall. That's right. But just because you have a wall doesn't mean you have a functioning city. It just means you have a wall, and you can now start building a functioning city because you are now protected. Okay? So at that line, that right there, and that line right there is they finished building it. Now what's really fun is if you add, so you have 683 years. It would take Okay, so from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, it would take 7 weeks, and I wrote 63. I'm sorry, guys. It's supposed to be 69, because 62 plus 7 is 69, sorry. So this right here, it's supposed to be 69. My bad if you guys are writing that down. So then looking at it, I'm like, this doesn't make sense in my head, and that's why. All right, so now let's continue. So he says, after the 62 weeks, in verse 26, so he talks about the troubled time of the 7 years, the 7 weeks, the 49 years it would take to rebuild Jerusalem, to rebuild. And then he says, after 62 weeks, an anointed one. And when the Old Testament refers to the anointed one, a special one, a chosen one, who is it referring to? The Messiah. Another name for the Messiah is Jesus. Christ is Messiah. It's referring to Jesus, okay? So at the certain point, after 62 weeks, the Messiah would be cut off and have nothing. So the line that takes place after the 62 is the Messiah is cut off. And depending on, is this marked to the day that the Messiah was killed, or was it when he was rejected by Israel, or exactly like I said, the time frames? I mean, we're talking stuff thousands of years ago. It's rough. Using lunar years, that is roughly around AD 30. Using, lunar years based on 444 BC, doing 360-day years. Have all those years, boom, you have AD 30-ish. Like I said, we can't know exactly when the Messiah was cut off. So you guys track with my timeline so far? So that's what's being played out. And so I'll be cut off and have nothing. And it says, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood. Now you guys think about what God has, Gabriel, God, the messenger, has just told Daniel. The city will be rebuilt, but then the anointed one is going to be cut off. And then your temple is going to be destroyed. So in essence, your temple is going to be destroyed again. That's what it says. It says, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. There is no time for this. There's no time block. It doesn't say, and after 63 weeks, or after this, or so many. It just says, and at some point, your city will be run over, and the temple will be destroyed. And this happened in AD 70. So I would put in the gap, inside the square, not on a line, but inside the square. All right, at AD 70, pretty much Jerusalem was burned and the temple was destroyed because the Jewish people had this awesome idea. They thought they could rebel against the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire surrounded the city with 3 legions, conquered the wall, and then accidentally set the temple on fire and pretty much demolished it to the ground. Oops. Gone. So we historically know that took place in AD 70, and that is where there is this giant, what I call a gap. And we call it the church age. This is where God is working in the life of the church primarily, not the nation of Israel. In the book of Romans, it is said that he has temporarily set aside the nation of Israel. After the anointed one, Jesus, the Messiah, was cut off, after they rejected their king and their savior, God temporarily moves them away. And he's like, I'm done working with you guys now. Now is the time of the Gentiles. And he starts working in the age of the church. It says in Romans chapter 11, verse 1, there's the question though, is God ever going to work again in the nation, with the nation of Israel? And it says, I ask then, has God rejected his people? And Paul says, by no means, for I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Do you not know what the scripture says of Elijah, how he appeals to God against Israel? And so he then explains this thing, how, hey, God isn't done. And I think by this timeline, though, we can also see, though, that God isn't done either. Because there is a gap with the temple is being destroyed, the city is overrun. We know in the New Testament, we see God is done at dealing primarily with the nation of Israel, and he's moving into the church age. And he goes, but there will come a time that there's 1 week period left to fulfill. See, we've done the 62, we've done the 7, and now there's this 1 more week period. But before I go, you guys might be wondering about this cool eyeball that I put on here with these hills. If you guys notice the dotted lines, if you guys ever tried looking over a hill, you don't really get to see what's underneath, do you? You only get to see what's on top of the mountains, okay? So the same reason as you look at Mount Rainier or you look at the Rocky Mountains or whatever, you only see the high points, don't you? You don't get to see what's underneath or behind the mountain. You only get to see the main events. And so if we look at this from the standpoint, God is letting Daniel see through history, but he only gets to see the high points. The restoration of Jerusalem, the burning of Jerusalem. Did you see how he's only letting him see the high points? He's not talking about exactly how it's playing out in the middle of those times, which is why he sees Jerusalem getting rebuilt. He sees Messiah getting cut off. He sees the temple being burnt to the ground. And then this last week, he gets to see that. So it's like he's slowly looking up taller and taller and taller hills. He doesn't really get to see this gap of, we don't know how long the church age is going to last, until God decides to restore what he's now talking about here with this last week. We don't know how long. And anybody who says they know when God is coming back, you just do this to them and you just leave. I'm serious. They have no stinking idea when God is coming back. If they say they do, they're a heretic. Period. Okay. Speaking to you, internet people, you are heretics if you know when God is coming back. It's ridiculous. Okay. All right, and the people of the prince who is to come. Now, think about that. So now we have this historical context. It's the Romans, right? The Romans came, burned Rome. When the Romans shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary, and he brings up the people of the prince who is to come. And some of you might have heard, well, how do we know who the Antichrist is? How do we know who this famous leader is? This is one of the phrases, the verses that helps us actually put it in the context. The people of the prince who is to come. The Romans were the ones who did this. And that is why people think the Antichrist has a Roman background, because it's the people of the prince who is to come. You guys see how that works? Okay, so let's keep going. Innocent confound. Okay, verse 27. He, this prince, shall make, so this is where you want to start that one more line that we have left. He shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. This is the last week that we have to deal with. And the Israelite history that God is presenting here. He will make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. This leader, this prince of the Romans who is going to come, is going to make a strong covenant. So this point right here, the beginning is what we call a peace treaty, a covenant, a strong agreement is going to be made at the beginning of this. It's supposed to last 7 years. And for half of the week, he shall then put an end to sacrifice and offering. Now, wait a minute. Strong covenant ends up stopping sacrifice and offering again. But if we think about that, if they are having sacrifices and offering, what has been built? It's the temple again. Man, you can imagine what Daniel's thinking here. Wait, the temple gets rebuilt, burnt, rebuilt. Stop. This is your Make Israel Great plan? Not really working here. What's going on? The temple's up and down, up and sort of stop. But at halfway through is the sacrifices are stopped in the temple. So this, the block that takes place here, halfway through, 3.5 years in, the treaty is in essence broken. The temple sacrifices are stopped once again. And then at the end is decreed, God comes back and puts the smack down, and boom, then God has completely worked Israel's history out in the time. Now, I want you guys to think about a couple things. You guys want to know what's sitting currently on where the temple's supposed to go? The Dome of the Rock. Now, there's only one way for sacrifices, Jewish sacrifices, to be offered. Something has to happen to this. Now, just speculating, okay? If something were to happen to this, the Islamic people, being a people of peace and love and acceptance of women and etc., I say that completely mockingly, okay? It's just straight up. Their ideology is completely different. They would freak out. It would take a strong leader to make peace between Israel and the entire Islamic horde. Am I right? So when this guy, whoever he is, this prince of the people who burned Rome, or burned Jerusalem, these Romans, this Roman people, he would look like Israel's Messiah, would he not? I rescued Israel from... And they go, and they think he's amazing. And then at 3.5 years, they actually find out that their Messiah hates them and actually wants their full destruction. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll see what plays out in other books. But that is the 70 weeks. Now, this is probably dangerous. Any questions about what we specifically talked about today? Now, what do you think of Lamentations? Nope, not doing that. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. I'd like to explain this. So the one last thing I'd like to share with you guys is, what can we take out of this? It's one of those, we just got this huge history lesson, et cetera. Is there anything we can take out of this to remind me? Well, if God has the days of his special chosen people numbered, God calls us his special and chosen adopted children. He has our days numbered as well. And God is really good at bringing all things to pass in a perfect little way, and he has your life as well. And so here, the nation of Israel, God said flat out, you're going to have some ups and you're going to have some downs. And you're going to have some ups and you're going to have some downs. But eventually, at the end of this time, I will bring everything together and all the wrongs will be righted because I am fighting for you guys. And the same thing is true for us. God has our days numbered. We're going to have ups. We're going to have downs. We're going to have more ups. We're going to have downs. And at the end, we're going to see that God has righted. He'll have righted all the wrongs and have brought it all to pass for our good.